I was recommended this book as a guide to what's currently going on in our country. It's a decade-old book that I thought was going to be a guide, but it turned out to be a manifesto for a certain kind of ideology. But I didn't realize it till about halfway through, so I almost agreed with what it was saying. I made my notes as I was reading it, so that might come across in what I'm about to say. But by page 6, it makes the point that democracy is inherently progressive. To undo anything is to admit that we were wrong. Everything comes to a vote, and everything has to get done, so everything has to keep moving forward. It discusses political Darwinism, which sets the stage for how politicians have to survive in modern politics. If their competitors are doing some dirty dealings, they should also do some dirty dealings or get left behind. Politics has to evolve, or else they're going to fail. What it specifically talks about is this effect where every time something goes wrong, it's blamed on whoever's currently in office, and every time something goes right, it's blamed on whoever set it up. Therefore, there is no immediate action to do anything good, but there's a lot of motivation to set up something bad for the next guy, whether or not you hear about it in the media. And these are all good points. The book then makes an argument for taking our whole society, throwing it away, and rebuilding it as a neo-cameralist society, which is described as a society where instead of letting our billionaires lobby politicians, we just sell shares at the council like their stocks on the open market. So if a billionaire wants to own the country, they can literally own the country. And the idea behind this is that they're going to have a duty to the customer, which would be its residents, to make things better. However, this is just political corruption skipping a few steps and creating company towns. It claims that Hong Kong, Singapore, and Dubai are examples of a neo-cameralist society. Wrong, and wrong. And it also says that in all these countries, there are people that live lives of decadence unlike any American could ever have. And I know, at least in the case of Dubai, there are people so low on the social ladder there that they're not even allowed to be a part of this kind of conversation. This book also posits that democracy appears where progress needs managed. It kind of consumes it. Wherever anyone's looking for progress, democracy soon pops up to manage progress. And that has, in the opinion of the author, led to a global idealization towards democracy. And that comes with all the issues that they've already pointed out, and says that it's on a global scale. It creates this idea of a zombie apocalypse, where our politicians and anyone who's taken a part in politics has to feed off each other in order to keep things moving. And the only way to get out of that is to quarantine or remove yourself from politics entirely, in this metaphor. And that would leave the only people left doing anything just the radicals. But by the next paragraph, our author, Nick Land, is likening the zombie apocalypse to minorities and claiming that if we have a real zombie apocalypse, that if we had a real zombie apocalypse, progressive democracy would make it so that the vitally challenged had rights. And I can't, at this point in my reading, I couldn't tell if this was supposed to be a metaphor going somewhere I couldn't tell, or propaganda for xenophobia. You'll figure out which one of those it is by the time I'm done with my review. Early into chapter 3 of this book, I've been given a quote that I like. Progress for the tick does not mean progress for the dog. However, I like to think of it in the way of progress for the oligarchs, the billionaires, does not make progress for the working class. But based on how they've been talking so far, I was concerned that they meant progress for black people did not mean progress for white people. However, this metaphor showcases something important that is going to be a theme of this book, that because we are inherently progressive as a democracy, there's no going backwards like the Conservative Party's main goal is. So the closest thing to going backwards is to making progress for the parasites that would set things back for the normal person. Going forward, it goes on to propose that enforcing equal rights creates a police state where we are forced to tolerate certain groups. It has gone off the deep end, and it is now officially a racist manifesto. It does make a point that, and I think this is why I was recommended this book, makes a point that strongly mirrors what Trump has been saying about DEI, where in a state where they're encouraged to have something to show for their time in office, politicians are going to do things that maybe politicians are going to do things that show off that they're working on the racial issue, and that can be giving them more than what's considered equal. Whether I agree with that or not is not for me to say right now, but to take that away out of nowhere was definitely the wrong choice, because it leaves the other group of people being put in spots that they don't deserve behind whoever they took out. It is the same problem but opposite. That's what reactionarianism is. That's what this book is about. It's reacting in equal force to what they consider evil because it infringed on what they had before. I'm going to read straight from my notes here because this is a big block text that I am not going to get right otherwise. He was missing a whole chapter in his table of contents, and in that missing chapter, he discussed how we should throw out the idea of equal and unalienable rights like our Constitution says, simply because it says that all men are created equal under God. And they want to argue that we should not agree with something so foolish simply because a faith or religion, a God, said so. I would like to argue that you should not need a God to have that opinion. So, in my opinion, those words in the Constitution still stand. Unalienable equal rights to life, liberty, and property, the pursuit of happiness. Nick Land then rants about how being white always lands on racism for one of two reasons. Either white people are so nice that we get trampled on, which to Nick Land I'd suggest picking up a history book, or two, because of genetics, our white skin is guaranteed to get muddied by anything that's not white. To which I would argue that if you feel such connection to the complexion of your skin that you think the obvious answer is racism, you're racist. Nick Land said something I agree with, but I don't like that he's right about it. He said that if reactionaries ever got into the spotlight like they have this year, and remind you, this is a decade-old book that said that they never would, this would give a platform for people that are racist simply because it opposes progress to have a spotlight and have intelligent, reasonable arguments come to light about why racism is good. It's obviously not good, but having a platform where reactionarianism is accepted lets them make those arguments in a public space, and it's getting increasingly more like that. In fact, if you're on the edge of whether or not you are racist, this book will probably put you over the edge because it does make a lot of reasonable arguments. However, you should never listen to the reasonable arguments of unreasonable people. You should have a strong core belief that no matter how much an argument is sound, You should have your beliefs on right and wrong. He makes the claim that white nationalism is only seen as evil because Hitler was evil. And he says this is unfair because then we would all see socialism as evil because Stalin was evil. I would like to argue that this is an argument that lacks nuance and shows Nick Land's lack of nuance. His argument is either we should have both or have neither. Or the worse, your side is just as evil as my side. Let me make my argument. Chapter 4 is divided into 7 subcategories, and the rest of the book from 4 on is racist as shit. 4b. In 4b, the author implies that black people are doomed to fail in society because they're born autistic. But in 4c, he opens with demonizing unions as a place for black people to go to get wealth from the white people handed to them on a silver platter, which is not the purpose unions are used for. 4D discusses weird overlaps between conservatism and libertarianism, which he does have sound arguments for. But the second half of 4D is really weird because he says that our politics were doomed to fail since the South lost the Civil War and we stopped fucking our cousins. 4E has the author claiming that the only way to have a future is to completely dismantle our society and wait for a later generation to rebuild it better. And 4D concludes by saying that race doesn't matter because eventually we'll give all our power to billionaires and they will spend their money to genetically uplift us to one super race. So there is the most racist manifesto I've ever read in my life. Goodbye. Also, I'd like to clarify that through this whole book, he blames white people ignoring racial issues and working on the race problem as the reason that racist exists. He's saying that working on rights for minorities is the real racism because it pushes otherwise quiet groups to become racist. That's what reactionarianism is about. It's about being misogynistic because the feminists made me misogynistic. It's about being racist because giving equal rights hurts your abilities. Being a reactionary is looking at your own failings and blaming the other guy for pushing you that far. It exists as a strong contrarianism. Progress is being resisted constantly, and reactionaries look at this resistance and go, well, obviously progress isn't working, let's do the other thing. Reactionist is what the Republican Party currently is. Being conservative doesn't exactly exist. He did make that point very good, that being a Democrat, or being in a democratic system, there's no such thing as moving backwards. There is, however, this diet conservatism that they've called neo-reactionaryism, wherein instead of moving things backward, they create the illusion of moving things backwards by giving power and making progress for the people that are infringing on human rights. Nick Land also desperately wants to believe that some rich billionaire Nick Land also wants to believe that some rich billionaire out there is going to solve all our race problems by artificially uplifting us to a super race, which, even if that was even remotely morally acceptable, the issue with that is what billionaire would. Given the opportunity to design us for purposes that benefit them, why would they uplift us? They would make us the most obedient monkeys in the world. We would not have rights. And I want to end this on a weird note. I want to blame the left for something, because reactionists do exist for a reason. The left has an infighting problem. There is a constant competition to be the best leftist. You have no clear leaders, and anytime one pops up, you doubt them for not being left enough. You hate on each other for not caring about this issue or that issue enough. I got in a fight with someone today because I suggested that minorities should be protected, and they're like, well, we aren't caring about the sick people yet. Why go to minorities? You can't argue over who's the best leftist. You have to work together. This is a politics, for us especially, is a group project. You can't be fighting each other. You can't be trying to be the leader of a movement. You have to find our leader and make that guy work for us. Mamdani in New York is doing a great job of that. He solves the three core issues of being on the left these days, which is the infighting, the lack of clear leaders, and the lack of a plan. There have been some cases where we got through the first two things. For example, Bernie Sanders. Bernie Sanders says a lot of good shit that he wants to happen, but he doesn't have a plan for making it happen. Mamdani doesn't infight. He's a clear leader that we all know, and he has a personality that's easy to recognize as more than just a politician. And he has a plan. We've all seen the chart. I'm going to throw it up here now, I guess. We've all seen the chart. That is what the right side has that we are lacking in abundance. They don't infight, they have clear leaders, and they have plans. Us taking down leaders and plans to continuously argue over who's right and who's wrong within our own group is what pushes people to go, okay, maybe the opposite side is better, or, like he said, quarantine and remove ourselves from politics entirely. We need to look at this as a warning sign and stop being the toxic people that create the reactionaries. Because reactionaries aren't inherently right-wing. They just gravitate there in our society because the left wing doesn't like reactionaries. And our right wing is radical and organized. They're gonna beat us if we don't solve that problem. I'm saying is be kinder with your politics and stay a fan.